Right, so the time has finally arrived, and here we have Half-Life 2 RTX, although it is the demo. So we do have access to two chapters here. One is Ravenholme and the other is Nova Prospect. And we're just going to start up with Ravenholme here. I'm testing this on the RTX 5080, 7800 X3D and 32 gigabytes of DDR5 6000 megatransfers per second CL30 memory. Quite a mouthful. All right, so I'm just at the start here. I just wanted to record my intro. So you'll notice that under the options, I'm playing on difficulty easy, right? That's just me. But under options, you can basically just select your resolution, and then there's advanced options like field of view, whatever. So if you want to access options for the RTX Remix, you have to press Alt and X, and then you'll be presented with this menu over here. And then you do have a bunch of options here. Just select DLSS preset to custom, and then you can actually modify all of the DLSS settings here. Now this is an RTX Remix, right? So it is GeForce branded, and they did assist with the development of this. So it has all the NVIDIA features here, and it actually runs very well, or better, on NVIDIA GPUs than on AMD and Intel GPUs. So you do have the option to select between the transformer and the CNN model, right? So transformer model is the latest DLSS 4 transformer model. And then we have a bunch of DLSS settings here. So just make sure that when you do change the DLSS mode, that it does show you the render resolution correctly here. So 1440p quality would be 960p, that is correct. And then performance would be 720p, right? So, well, just above 720p. So just make sure that all of those resolution scales do apply correctly. Then we'll just disable frame generation for now, and if you do click save settings will just keep these settings to persist through your next game session, right? So click save settings, and the next time you start up the game, it'll start up with these settings. Otherwise it'll just restore the defaults. Now we do have a developer settings menu here as well, and over here you can actually select you can select DLAA, like full resolution, whereas in the previous menu you can't. And then we also have under enhancements, you can enable and disable all the latest assets. It does not completely disable RTGI, right? But so the game is still very heavy, even with these disabled, but it just gives you an idea what the original game with the original assets look like. Then there's a bunch of settings here. I'm not going to go through every single thing here, but the game supports NRC. It supports DLSS Multi-Frame Generation, upscaling, all the RTX tech that you can think of. It is supported basically, and it is also supported on all RTX GPUs. So just because it says DLSS 4 doesn't mean your RTX 2080 Ti cannot run it. It can run it. All the options, NRC, all those options are available on all RTX GPUs. You can see we are using around 11 gigabytes of VRAM allocated there, and then used is almost 10 gigabyte. We are using DLSS quality here, but the game just it looks fantastic, right? And I know that there's going to be a lot of sour comments, salty comments. I do understand that, but it is a fully path traced. Let's call it fully path traced, right? There are still some certain objects that aren't fully ray traced, right? But for the most part, it is fully ray traced. It is very heavy, but that's just path tracing, right? Path tracing is exceptionally heavy. So without any form of upscaling, you are going to have a tough time. And as you can see, I'm already having a tough time. We're basically maintaining 60 frames per second here. Now, I cannot record my lows or my averages for some reason. It just doesn't start with RTSS. And so I've got in the top right hand corner, I do have the NVIDIA overlay as well, which shows you the 1% lows. Okay, it does refresh quite often, and it also just shows you the PC latency because I want to do some frame generation testing as well. But here you have it, 60 frames per second basically possible almost all of the time here, except when there's a huge explosion trying to be dropped down to 54 frames per second there. Now, I do believe that the performance will be much improved, or maybe not much, but it will definitely be improved in the final version. This is the demo, remember, and 60 frames per second, give or take, is definitely doable. Now, one thing that you can do, because we are using the transformer model, which does look a lot better than the normal CNN or convolution neural network model, right? That's the old model. You can actually go down to DLSS Performance at 1440p, whereas previously I would not recommend anything below balanced, right? It's not perfect. There are some smearing issues, some disocclusion, ghosting, etc., but it still looks plenty good. It's definitely playable. I'm actually going to try and use DLSS Performance for my playthrough of the whole demo, and just because it definitely looks acceptable. I'm really not too worried about about DLSS Performance here. Obviously it looks better at higher resolutions, but you can see we are getting around 90-ish frames per second here. Now, if we kick on frame generation, I'm going to drop down back to DLSS. Sorry, that's wrong button. I'm going to go back to DLSS quality, right? And then I'm going to enable frame generation, but only 2 times. And I want to, the reason why I'm just going to start here, because the 40 series GPUs all support 2 times frame gen, and then the 50 series GPUs all support 2x, 3x, and 4x, right? Unfortunately, the 30 series and the 20 series, that's the only feature that it does not support. It is frame generation. All right, so 120 something frames per second. You look at our PC latency, we are getting around 45 to 50 milliseconds PC latency. Not the end of the world, although personally I would try and maintain around, well, there's quite a lot there. I'd try and maintain around 40 or below at all times, but it's playable. It definitely is playable. Okay, so 120-ish frames per second. It's doable, it's playable. It won't maintain 120 at all times, right? Unless we drop down the DLSS preset. Okay, so I'm going to just move out of danger here, press Alt X, and then if we enable 3x, remember 3x and 4x are only available to the RTX 50 series GPUs. Now our PC latency increased around 45, 50 milliseconds, give or take. The biggest increase to your PC latency would be by just enabling DLSS frame generation. I'm going to die. By just enabling DLSS frame generation. Going to 3x and 4x does not really affect the... Oh, I'm really going to die. Does not really affect the PC latency that much, right? There is a slight increase, but really not the end of the world. All right, so I really don't want to die. That'll be embarrassing. All right, so I just reloaded my save because that happened. I just wanted to show you. All right, so 150, 160-ish frames per second with the DLSS 3x MFG. Not the end of the world. As I said, we're not maintaining 60 frames per second base frame rate at all times here, but it's not a horrible experience, though I would personally prefer a little bit of a higher base frame rate, right? So let's go ahead and die again, apparently. Jeez. Benchmarking and playing is definitely not for me, doing both at the same time. So if we go ahead and just to drop this down, this is what I want to show you. If we go to Alt X and we drop this down to, let's say, performance. Let's start off balance first, right? Let's just save settings balanced. Now we are getting 190-ish frames per second. Okay, so which means just divided by 3 and you'll get the base frame rate. It's above 60 frames per second. PC latency is hovering around 45 to 47 milliseconds there, right? And it feels perfectly fine. Now, if we go ahead and just drop this down to performance, let's just see what kind of setting, what kind of frame rate we actually get you to 120 45 frames per second, and PC latency between 40 and 45 milliseconds again. All right, so if I just want to get to a little bit of a more open world area like over here. You can see there's quite a lot happening here. The frame rate does drop a bit here. We are still fully GPU bound. GPUs are just sitting at 99%, getting 100 and something frames per second, 190 something frames per second, I mean. And it feels okay. Unfortunately, as I said, you have to drop down to DLSS Performance for this. But then if we go ahead and kick on DLSS 4, MFG times 4, we are now seeing 260-ish frames per second. Right now we are seeing around 50 milliseconds of PC latency, which I'm personally still okay with, I think. Although there are some areas where it'll start dropping a little bit of the frame rate, or the frame rate will start dropping a little bit. And it does, you do start to notice the increase in input latency, right? So it's maybe better. Personally, for me, I'll just be using DLSS Performance and 3x MFG. There are some artifacts here just in the crosshair, right, at 4 times MFG, but for the most part the game looks perfectly fine, and the lighting in this game is just phenomenal. This is a great remix. It's done very well. It is very heavy, as I said, but it does look fantastic. It's really good to see one of my favorite games being modernized. Yeah. All right, so let me just see if I've covered everything. I actually have not. So if we go back to, let's just disable DLSS quickly, or DLSS Frame Gen. Let's go to DLSS quality again, right? So we are basically 60 frames per second. And if we then go to rendering here, we do have a preset, right? So if we drop this from ultra to high, you'll see that the max light bounces changes from 4 to 2, right? 4 to 2. So you can play around with the presets here, and if you want a little bit of a higher frame rate. So medium actually looks quite okay, and we are getting 80-ish frames per second here. All right, so as you can see, we gained a little bit of performance here, just dropping down to the medium preset, and we are always above 60 frames per second now, into the 70s, mid 70s, and even 90s at times, right? So if we now go ahead and enable some frame generation, we should be pretty good, right? I'm actually going to not use this menu. Need to use this menu. So let's enable DLSS 2x, because I do think majority of people will be using 2x instead of 4x. I mean, the people that can use frame generation, right? You can see we are now getting 50-ish 135 frames per second there, and 43 to 45 milliseconds of PC latency. I think this is actually perfectly fine as well. So you don't have to play on the ultra preset, and for people on a lower end GPU like a 3060 Ti, which I believe is the minimum requirement for this game, like you can obviously drop it down to the medium preset, the low preset, whatever, and it'll still look plenty good, right? So 150-ish frames per second here in the specific spot. I think that's going to be it for 1440p. One last test I want to do is I just want to enable DLSS 4x here, or MFG 4x. I keep on saying DLSS 4x, but MFG 4x, 240 frames per second would be 60 base frame rate, and we do seem to maintain that at all times. So I think if you aim for 60 base, you should have a good enough time. I wouldn't mind playing like this at all. All right, so that's it for 1440p. Let's move over to 4K. All right, we're now at 4K. I started the game from scratch again. Started a new game. Now 4K it's kind of heavy. I'll show you now. Actually, just wanna let's start off 4K Ultra, right? You can see our VRAM usage is creeping up to around 12 gigabytes of VRAM used there. That's what the app predicts, and just want to make sure everything is fine. So we do have Ultra, and we do have DLSS quality, no frame duration enabled. All right, okay, so I think we are good, and if you want to see, we are 4K. If we have a look at our frame rate, we're not doing so well. Okay, so 40-ish frames per second, it drops down into the 30s, and I've seen 28 frames per second at times as well, right? So it's quite heavy. Okay, I think we've I think we've concluded that before. It is a very heavy game, but it is also an exceptionally good looking game. Now, if we want to get 60 frames per second here on the RTX 5080, you can see our VRAM usage is creeping way up. We are in the red. Okay, so if we want to get 60 frames per second here, we actually have to use DLSS Performance at 4K, and even then, we're not really seeing 60 frames per second at all times, unfortunately. But we are close enough that maybe just dropping down 1 or 2 settings would get us to a consistent 60 frames per second. We'll test that just now, but you can see 4K. I would personally recommend something like a 4090 and a 5090 if you want to do 4K, because we can go to ultra performance, and I'll show you now. Ultra performance actually gives you a very, very big boost to the frame rate. We are seeing 90-ish frames per second now. It still looks okay. I mean, we are rendering internally now at 720p, upscaling to 4K. It is going to look a lot softer than, say, DLSS quality, I mean, and but it is playable. It still looks good. It gives you a much higher frame rate, and I think I can't see. It definitely gives you a much higher frame rate, much better playable experience, right? You can see our PC latency is sitting at 22 milliseconds of PC latency. That's fine. We didn't drop below 70 frames per second there. I think definitely stayed above 60 at all times. So this is actually a perfect candidate for frame generation. But what I'm going to do, I'll always go into the options menu, sorry. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use DLSS Performance here, okay? You can see there, it says 1080p internal render resolution, save settings, and then if we go to rendering, I'm going to drop this to the high preset. Let's just see if it makes a big enough difference. Actually, I think medium would be better, yeah. Okay, so we are basically getting the same frame rate as what we had with DLSS quality on the medium preset, I believe. So I think for 4K this is fine. It shouldn't drop below 60 frames per second too much. Okay, 65-ish frames per second. I'm going to move a little bit quicker here. So let's use these settings rather, and let's enable DLSS MFG, well, not MFG, just the DLSS Frame Generation 2x, 120 frames per second here with the 4K output. Sure, it's 1080p internal render resolution. I know I'm going to be getting a lot of comments on that it is way too heavy, and I agree, it is heavy, right? But it's also a free mod that you can download now, and the full game would also be free if you already own the game Half-Life 2 on Steam. I'm not sure if you require the game for the demo to work as well, but yeah, you can give it a shot, right? Half-Life 2 is also quite cheap. It's always on special, or it's very often it's on special. So on sale, we call it special here in South Africa. So give it a shot, try it out for yourself. And I mean, if you if you don't have a high-end GPU, let me know in the comments below what settings you settled on, right? I'm very curious to find out how the 4070s and the 3060 Ti's and those GPUs perform in this game. And I do think we might die here again. I don't know why I suck so much in this game. All right, so 100 and something frames per second, 120 frames per second, more or less. It did drop below there, like it drops down to 100, and we lose our there we go, our PC latency metrics. That's fine now. So 44 milliseconds of PC latency is fine. Some games have higher base PC latency than others. Alan Wake, for example, has a much higher base input latency than something like Cyberpunk, for example, right? So there are differences in that as well. But I think that's going to conclude our 4K testing at 4x MFG. So 2x. Why can I not say it correctly? 2x frame generation. Now we're at 3x MFG, and you can see our PC latency went up to around 50-ish. You do start to notice it now. It is a little bit more sluggish. The mouse input is a little bit more laggy. Other people would perceive it differently, right? Other people would be perfectly fine with it. Other people would not accept anything above 25 milliseconds in this game, so no frame generation whatsoever. People are different. They are fine with different things, right? So I'm okay with, I'd say, up to 40 45 milliseconds of PC latency in this specific game. As I said, it does differ between games. All right, so 160-ish frames per second here, and if we then just do DLSS 4x MFG, just see if we get close to 240. We shouldn't, right? So 200 frames per second, which means 50 frames per second base frame rate and around 55 to 60 milliseconds of PC latency. Like it's really, it doesn't feel too bad, but you will start seeing some artifacts as well, right? Especially in the cursor. You probably won't see it now. The cursor is very, the crosshair, it's very small, but you do start to see it disappear and appear a bit. That's just unfortunately one of the side effects of frame generation. It happened with the earlier versions of frame generation as well, even 2x, right? They did fix it in most games, or address it in most games, right? So hopefully, I'm pretty sure it will improve over time, that the artifacts and the input latency might be a little bit less, etc., with the MFG going forward. All right, but as I said, the game is free on Steam at the moment, the demo at least. So give it a shot, download it, test it on your system if you are curious, and let me know in the comments below what kind of hardware you use and what kind of performance you were getting. I'm actually very curious. And on that note, I just want to say thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, and as always, we hope to see you in the next one.